Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, Director of the Brattleboro Museum. Really excited to be here with you tonight and looking forward to this conversation with Kenny Rivero, Charles Moffett, and Michael Jevon Demps, followed by a Q&A with all of you afterwards. This conversation tonight is presented in connection with the exhibit Palm Oil, Rum, Honey, Yellow Flowers, which opened at the Brattleboro Museum on March 18th and is on view through June 13th. It features works on paper by Kenny Rivero and was curated by Sarah Freeman. It's Kenny's first solo museum show, and it's so strong. It's mostly small works in a relatively small gallery, but you can get lost in there for hours poring over Kenny's drawings. It's really an honor to have Kenny's work up at our museum, and we're delighted that it's been getting recognition far and wide, including in this week's New York Times Style magazine. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Kenny and Charles and Michael to join me on screen. The plan is that they're going to talk for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to your questions and comments. If you'd like to submit a question or a comment, if you're here via Zoom, please use the Q&A button on your screen. You can do that at any time during the talk, but we're going to save the questions and comments to the end, and then we'll get to them. But if something occurs to you, during the conversation, please just go ahead and type it in at that time. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can type your questions or comments there as well, and we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, with that housekeeping taken care of, I'm going to ask Kenny, Charles, and Michael to turn on their cameras and microphones now. And while they're doing that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each one of them. Kenny Rivero is an artist living and working in New York. He received his BFA from the School of Visual Arts and an MFA from Yale. Kenny's work, which spans paintings, collage, drawings, and sculpture, explores the complexity of identity through narrative images, language, and symbolism. His creative process allows him to explore what he perceives as the broken narrative of Dominican-American identity, socio-geographic solidarity, familial expectations, race, and gender roles. Kenny's work is included in notable public collections, including the Studio Museum in Harlem, El Museo del Barrio, the Whitney Museum, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, among others. Charles Moffett is the founder and owner of Charles Moffett Gallery in New York. In 2017, Charles left Sotheby's Auction House, having spent 4 years working in the contemporary art department there, to pursue his dream of opening a space focused on emerging artists. Before opening the gallery in 2018, he spent time working closely with dealers and collectors to help secure blue chip secondary market material. Before long, he decided his dream of having a space to call his own couldn't wait any longer. Fast forward to today, Charles Moffett Gallery now represents 6 artists, including Kenny Rivero, and is dedicated to championing the careers of artists through careful placement of their work and collaborations with institutions. And Michael Jevon Demps is originally from Detroit. He's a multidisciplinary artist whose work is fueled by a fascination with the nature of being in one's body, and more specifically, the social structures that confine the body's ability to move through the world. Since earning an MFA in sculpture from Yale, Michael's been awarded a number of residencies, including Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture and the Fountainhead Residency in Miami. His recent exhibitions have included the Visual Arts Center of Richmond, Virginia, Blackburn 2020, Charles Moffett Gallery, and the Studio Museum in Harlem. Kenny, Charles, Michael, thank you all so much for being here. This is a real treat, and we're really grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Hey, yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. I just want to start off by saying I'm nervous, and so you might see me fumble through the screen share and such, but it's an honor to be here with y'all, and I'm hyped for this.
I'm nervous too. You're good. We're good.
Yeah, we're all nervous. This is great.
Kenny, what's good? Okay, so Kenny.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. I'm very much interested in your process in drawing. I know that you make a lot of different kinds of work, from sculpture, painting, installation. But it seems, I'm gonna act like I don't know you for a second and say that it seems that drawing is like a centerpiece and fuels a lot of different ways that you think. And so I'm just interested for you to jump in and talk about what drawing means to you, how it's evolved in your creative practice. And as we get into it, I'm gonna put some images up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for having me. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm really excited to kind of have this conversation and talk about these drawings that I rarely talk about because I rarely show them. It's a really private part of my practice. I feel like my drawing practice is something that I haven't necessarily come to terms with in terms of like how they identify me as an artist. Like I've always drawn. Something that I say a lot is that like I remember when I learned how to paint. I don't remember when I learned how to draw. So that connection to drawing is something that I feel is very deep. And the work in the show, for instance, spans such a long time because like in my mind, like a drawing could never be finished. So for me, it's really about the action of note taking, the action of making a mark, and just thinking about my connection to the materials that I'm drawing on too. So the drawing practice is like itself interdisciplinary, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily, rely on being defined as like drawing. It's really about paper and about collecting and about indexing moments in my life, about channeling different sources of information that I'm receiving constantly, and trying to figure out a quick way to kind of synthesize those things that I'm constantly trying to kind of like navigate and manage.
Yeah.
I also feel like there's an intimacy that I'm really interested in with drawing, where I literally like, thinking about it physically, like I have to do it here. I have to do it in a very close space, close to my body. And that offers another kind of like reflective, meditative, and sometimes challenging space, because drawing also kind of, for me, forces you to kind of confront things very quickly.
Right.
Because things come out so fluidly and things come out so directly, it's like, oh shit, now I have to deal with this for real,
Yeah, for sure.
Like there's a drawing in the show now, I believe it's called like album titles or 8 albums. And I forgot that it was in the show. And like I keep going back and forth, like since I learned that it was in the show, about being nervous about it. Because again, these aren't necessarily things that I'm planning on showing. So they put me in a really vulnerable place a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I actually like think about what I was thinking about when I made this list, for instance, I kind of cringe a little bit, because again, it's not meant to be like, I feel like painting, like I'm already kind of geared to think about an audience or thinking about a viewer.
Yeah.
But with drawings, like I'm only counting on myself reading these. So it's a very different kind of space that way.
I'm gonna go back to the drawing that I was just had on my screen, but yeah, as I'm switching over, I mean, so this is something that I, in coming to this talk and trying to prepare, this is something that is always stuck out to me, or like that I felt was super inspiring about your practice, is the different kinds of headspace, creative spaces that you hold. And I, specifically in drawing, I'm thinking about this idea that, well, let me pose it as a question, like, this intimate space, and this idea of audience in a painting, maybe versus this idea of like a drawing and it being for you. Do you see those as different? I mean, as I'm asking the question, I feel silly because it's in the question.
No, go for it.
This idea of like the different headspaces that I feel like maybe drawing and painting hold, or drawing in other ways of thinking, but specifically drawing, like how does discovery and like playfulness and like how do you feel about those, or how do those manifest in your drawing practice? And I'm gonna bring, like I said, I'm gonna bring that image back up that I was just referencing.
Yeah. Well, the thing with drawing that I feel like painting doesn't have is a relationship to writing. Like you're literally using the same materials, the same hand, the same kind of like pressure on the page that you do when you're writing words. So I think that there's something about legibility and readability that I try to kind of like achieve in drawing that with painting, I don't care about that so much.
Yeah.
With painting, for me, it's more about creating these layers and creating these secrets almost, and these kind of like hidden pockets of activity that you don't necessarily see at the end. But with drawing, it's like, I remember, I'm not telling Sarah this the other day, but most of the homework that I turned into school in elementary school had notes on it for my dad, like scribbling shit when he was on the phone. So it'd be like phone numbers, and it'd be like a little piece of rice stuck on it with like a grease spot, and all these things. And I used to be so embarrassed taking these things to school.
Yeah.
And now, like, and I have some of those pages still. I love that because, like, for me, it's this thing that contains all this history and all these like accidents that speaks to like a real life. Where with painting, like every surface of the painting, you kind of have to make a decision about. Like, it doesn't just become itself in the same way that paper can do that, and the way that paper and drawing and writing has access to different ways of living outside of a studio life. And I think, like, sorry, there was another part of your question that I was really interested in.
In reference to this image that we're looking at now, I can feel that energy and so that history and the ways that you're describing how those like kind of elementary homework papers like influenced your drawing practice now. And like, I know that because I know I've had the blessing of being in your studio and building with you a lot. But like, can you talk about that, how that's maybe present in this image, or like, is there some of that here? And like, I know that you wanted to point to this one, and this is one of my favorite things that I saw in your studio recently. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. This is and so also, and I'll say this and I'll kind of come back to it, but for me, drawing is also connected to resourcefulness and connected to a different kind of access that painting doesn't offer. And I always compare it to like basketball versus hockey. Like, a lot of people play basketball, a lot of people don't play hockey because they can't afford it. And it's an investment in a different way. So this painting in particular is of two drawings that I made. So I'm remade a painting of two drawings that I made when I was a kid in like 3rd grade or 4th grade. And this was in, I think it's called CCD. It's basically they pull you out of school, like a Catholic church program pulls you out of school, like on a Wednesday, for instance, after lunch, and you spend the rest of that day at church kind of studying the Bible and like listening to these like priests and nuns just like teach you from these verses and stuff. And the way it went was that like our first hour was just spent listening to like somebody read the Bible. And then we had to go to a classroom. They would give us like these manila folders. We'd tear them in half and share them with each other. And we'd have to draw what we remembered. And, back then, I like manila paper felt like such a privilege to draw on. It was so smooth and so nice. But it was also like not real archival. It's not drawing paper. But I still kind of want to honor that sensibility of drawing on the paper that's around you. So a lot of these things come from things that I've collected over time that are not necessarily art paper. And something else that happened around that time is that like I started to think about storytelling and like just kind of like thinking about the visual narratives that I was really interested in. And I remember as a kid, like hearing about the Bible and hearing all these stories that connected to like the origin of creation, but there were no dinosaurs. And I knew that dinosaurs were around. So in my mind, like dinosaurs populated the Bible, So whenever I kind of reference all these stories, I would include dinosaurs. And like at one point, I was obsessed with drawing Jesus on a dinosaur holding like a weapon always, or like shooting laser from his eyes, And the teacher never like got upset, and it was never an issue. It was never kind of like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And I feel like that's when I really started to get weird without knowing that I was getting weird. Like I thought I was being so factual, but I was really kind of, kind of absorbing the comic book content that I was taking, the cartoons that I was watching, all the violent movies I was watching too, and kind of combining that into these things. And then the bottom one is a calendar that I remember making as a kid. And I was obsessed with making calendars. I felt like making a calendar was like the most adult thing you could do. And like there was always calendars in the house. My mom had a calendar, my brother had a calendar, everybody had these calendars with all these notes on them. So I would make these like fake grid drawings that looked like, things that I had to do or something. And I would stand in front of it and be like, oh, I'm gonna do that today. And it'd be like nonsense on the paper. And so I think like you said, that playfulness and that that like, I don't know, I don't want to call it childlike approach, but maybe naive approach to trying to understand the world through these like objects and things, especially paper and mark making. for me, is something that I really learned from. And I'm so glad that I didn't, that I wasn't hard on myself for like going that way too much. And
Yeah.
I kind of just been embracing that since, you know.
Yeah.
And like I used to make a lot of drawings in high school, especially of like DC and Marvel combined, you know, and that was like blasphemous back then. So
Right.
things like that, where I was really trying to like push this idea of what it means to represent something like honestly, or how to challenge those ideas too.
Yeah. It's deep to think about. You know, something that you just underlined in that is this idea of like childlike versus like, for me, I think about it like this idea of like childlike as something that we can dismiss versus like making from like a vulnerable place that's like an inner child place, you
Mhm.
know, or like, you know, this idea that like as artists, especially when working with imagery, that we have to be able to like have the facility to like name things legibly through the way that we like craft them or something.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that something that draws me to your work, and as I'm talking about this, I'm just gonna scroll through some of these,
Mhm.
some of this Batman and like comic book imagery that I'm super hype on in these drawings. But this idea that like the headspace to be vulnerable and like think about this kind of representation and what it means, what it meant to you then, what it means to you now, and to bring those memories back and
Mhm.
in the work and work from like a kind of place of memory, I think is super powerful.
Mm.
How do you feel about that? Or is that like how you think about it, or like, you
Yeah,
know?
of course. And I think the like one of the important things about having this be the work that represents like me in my first museum show is that like, you know, this year has been really intense and difficult as far as like navigating my mental health and reapproaching my mental health,
Yeah.
and thinking of new ways, new strategies to actually like keep myself safe in a lot of like, you know, these vulnerable like undertakings with studio stuff.
Yep.
And you know, going back to these drawings, like I and kind of after going through like a really pretty important like mental health transformation, like I'm holding space in such a different way.
Yep.
And I think these drawings are letting me kind of like take that next step forward by like releasing them into a show.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you've seen these in my studio, like they exist in piles. Like I have piles
No,
of
fact,
drawings
fact.
that I'm moving around, constantly drawing on, reorganizing, just looking at them, reflecting on them, touching them. Because there's something that I'm trying to unpack as far as like the trauma that I'm holding, to be real,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
And I think like the show feels really cathartic in a lot of ways, and it feels like a release, where the vulnerability like finally paid off.
Yeah.
And it's not about like feeling harmed by like a past, but really like owning it and taking um like being accountable in a different way or something. If that makes sense.
No, it does.
You
It
know?
does. And I mean, to that, you know, this idea that you actually brought this up earlier, when we first started, but this idea of like channeling and what it means to
Mhm.
channel,
Yeah.
in this space, you know, and yeah, you know, for me to speak to like this, you know, these hard times that like we've all been going through over the last year and a half, and thinking about like what it, you know, I feel super grateful for the opportunity that I can create and channel some of this energy and like process through creating. I don't know what I would do. I mean, you know, I'd be in the studio now, like, oh, you know, it's like you're confronting these things that are like difficult in a different way, and it's like a constant state of confrontation. But the
Yeah.
ability to channel that creative energy, or channel just the energy in general, I find it to be super important, and I've always found that like in the, you know, 5 years that I've known you, like super powerful in your work because you deal with it in a lot of different ways. I think. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I also it just made me think of something like that I've been trying to write about recently, actually. And this idea that like, you know, and I talked to you about earlier today about like the Lego building, and I started building Legos again. But I feel like whenever I do stuff like that with my hands, like especially the mechanic or engineer type stuff, I feel like I can sense like my ancestors somehow. You know, and I come from like a big family of like mechanics,
yeah,
like car mechanics, like, you know, Air Force mechanics. And I feel like so connected to like a larger spiritual energy when I'm making stuff with my hands,
yeah,
especially writing or drawing. Not so much with painting. Painting still feels like so new to me. Like, I mean, I started painting in the 2000s, so it's not something that I have this long history with outside of looking at images necessarily.
Right.
But writing, it's like what I'm also channeling is like spirit energy somehow. You know, like I really believe that like the vibrations of like my past ancestors' handwritings are still in my handwriting somehow.
Yeah.
And then that's a legacy that like drawing offers me, and like building also, like making things that are sculptural, taking apart a motorcycle, taking apart a bicycle, like all those things really make me feel like smaller and make me more aware of being like in a cosmic space, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
But painting is so like I feel like I'm dissing painting. I'm not trying to diss painting. I love painting.
No, it's just a different headspace.
It's a really different headspace. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I asked you this question already, but I also know you. And so like, I can anticipate your answer. So I'm gonna act like I don't know you.
Okay.
Just to elaborate a little bit more. Because I also like, I've heard you say in this conversation already that like the processes and like what you're concerned with in drawing versus painting are different, right?
Yeah.
And, like how you approach them are different. And I also understand that like the way that you get to things and discover things within the process are different. But like what else, like just speaking, because there are some similarities. So maybe can we talk about where is the overlap in drawing and painting, and how right now, how are they informing each other for you?
I think the overlap is in, it's a good question. I think in content, I think the stories that I'm telling in each space are pretty similar. Believe it or not, I feel like the stories in painting are like a lot more linear than they are in my drawings.
Yeah.
But they're still kind of like not necessarily like following like a storytelling pattern, let's say. But I think the storytelling is an overlap. The channeling is definitely an overlap. But the channeling that happens in the painting is more to do with like, to be honest, with my relationship to playing music and to playing drums, where I'm thinking about phrasing, I'm thinking about cadence, I'm thinking about all this kind of like metering that doesn't happen in the drawing. The drawing is just like, it's like my head voice, and then like painting is my stage voice or something, you know? And for me, like all the lessons that I learned from like how to solo, how to like, you know, be economical on an instrument, that's what's informing me. That's what made me like excited about painting, is the fact that I can apply those things.
Yeah.
But with drawing, that's not really like, I don't think about music when I'm drawing. I think about like, well, that's not true. So, you know, as you know, I've been writing a lot of like these rap verses for the last like year.
Yeah.
And they've taken on, they started off as me trying to be really serious and trying to like craft something really good.
Right.
And then they've evolved into just being really silly, and that's made them really good.
No,
even though the content may be like kind of nonsense, but it's like the drawings. It's like I can have 3 flowers and a phone number and it works.
Yeah, no.
Somehow. Yeah. Versus like, you know, a painting that is like, I flex in a different way. A painting is a lot more, it's a bigger build. It's a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it requires a different kind of attention in different stages, you know?
Yep.
But yeah.
I feel like I just throwing random questions at you, and I don't mean to, but in my mind they all.
Oh, it's fine.
On my mind they all connect.
Yeah.
But there is, okay, so something else that you said that Sarah also put forward is this idea of secrets, and you know, I want to tread carefully because I understand that in the ways that we're making, there's some secrets that are for us, and so like I'm not trying to ask you your secrets, but
yeah.
You know, like I'm gonna scroll back, like in some of this imagery, you know, you just related to it right now. Like there's numbers, you know, you'll have like very specific symbols, numbers, and it's like I feel like you're leaving hints, trails, codes for us. But that's just my reading of it. Can you speak to that a little bit, like how secrets and codes play out for you in the drawings and in the paintings?
Good question. I don't really know. I mean, I think like
let me rephrase that. Not play out. I don't want you to tell me how they play out, but like I'll ask it like this. It's a lexicon or like a language that you're incorporating. And I understand that because, as you know, we both have the connection to hip hop. We both rap and write music. I see some of that stuff as like scores, or like the ability to read music, or like embed something in something that's like a reference for you that might not be for everybody, right? So I guess what I'm asking is, like, with the channeling and the layers of embedded information in the language that you're using in both drawing and painting, can you speak to, you know what I'm saying? Can you speak to that? Like,
Yeah. I think something that I really like prioritize as far as making anything, whether it's painting, drawing, sculpture, installation, is that I have to create a circumstance that I can discover something as Kenny, like the viewer, not the viewer, but just me as the artist.
Right.
I have and you know this too from the work that you did in Virginia. Like I love wandering, I love walking, and something I used to do a lot as a kid. Something I used to do like probably the whole time I've lived in New York. And I think for me, the exciting part is finding things that are neglected, like finding a situation that like perhaps nobody saw, or like a physical part of the city that hasn't been seen by eyes or something like that. Because for me, those are portals, those are activation points, and those are like moments that like literally can like make something this big expand into something huge. And I feel like that's what the phone numbers are. That's what these little symbols are. They're like markings to indicate like an expansion or something. Like the 8s in this drawing, for instance, that's in the very top. I remember kind of wanting to make a glowing 8, and then I just made that, and then that for some reason in that moment felt perfect, and it like channeled something else that I wasn't expecting. So again, these things are kind of like, it's almost like cooking. It's like they're ingredients, and you like accidentally put turmeric in it, and now the whole thing is orange. But you're like, oh, it's orange now, you know? So it's like these happy accidents that happen as a result of you just kind of like drawing in collaboration with like being present, like a different self, like two selves working at once. Yeah,
man. It's wild to be in this energy with you all and going through these drawings and hearing you talk about them. I'm like experiencing them again differently. And so like I asked you earlier, you know, because I've been to your studio and understand in some of the ways how you work, like that you have piles and piles and piles of drawings that are like unpreciously sitting in piles in random places in your studio that you continue to go back in and out of. And, you know, some of them are super old, some of them are brand new. Can you talk a little bit about how you brought these specific drawings together for this space under this name?
Yeah. So it's a tough question, because I feel like I'm still discovering that. So something I do a lot is like I organize my studio, like, and rearrange things as much as I can, just to kind of reintroduce myself to the space. And I think with this pile, it became like a new organization that I hadn't put together before. Like all these drawings lived in very different circumstances with other drawings, like in groups of 3s or 4s. And then I put them together as a way to kind of like, to think about a catalog, to think about maybe telling a story, or to think about like images for an album or something like that. Like a family of drawings, not necessarily a series or a group. I don't like using the word series. But it's like drawings that like know each other. And I feel like these drawings, a lot of them don't feel like they belong together. So I put them in a pile so that they can become familiar with each other, like literally. And to see what that looked like. And then and I think one of the things that I realized is that like, it's like I get to see these drawings for like in a completely different way. Like for instance, this one, a lot of these were in books, they're in sketchbooks. And they didn't live outside. So I wanted to like just see how they would activate like my painting space, my studio, like my energy, in a different kind of like organization. So, and it's something that I do with like I've been reorganizing my baseball cards too, according to like the position of the body in the picture. And something I discovered was that a lot of these portraits of baseball cards where like people are like just standing on a field, not in an active kind of position, are because they didn't play that year. And then that became this like really sad thing for me of like, oh, like what does it mean for an athlete to have a card, but like it's kind of honoring the fact that he didn't get to play last year, you know?
Yeah.
So I think reorganizing my baseball cards is also something that influenced me reorganizing my drawings and trying to understand them in different contexts.
Yeah, I feel that. Okay, I got one question and then we're gonna pivot.
Okay.
Last question on this energy is, can you, I mean, you referenced it and talked about it a little bit already, but I also know you, and so this is for everybody who this might be the first time that they're like encountering your work. Can you talk about like, you know, something that has always been, since I've known you, that I'm hype about and I've related to you on, is collecting materials and engaging with the material history of the materials that you're choosing to put into your work, right? Like for you, I know that like I don't know for these specific drawings how much this is at play, but the idea that like you'll use old paper from like a photo book that was in your family, you know, like the ways that you choose to draw, what you choose to draw on, how you come about it, how it comes into your possession, and then how you choose to like turn it around and put it back out into the world. Can you talk a little bit about that for people who don't know?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, like my brother was a DJ, and he had like crates and like at least 50 crates of records in our room. And I would take the blank record sleeves and draw on them. It was free paper, you know. And like my sister was going to school, so I started like ripping out the blank pages of the books, and just started collecting that. And I would do it from every textbook I ever had at school. And after a while, like I stopped drawing. Like after elementary school, I stopped drawing on that kind of paper and always had a sketchbook, but I kept collecting it. And I think like it's funny because when I got to SBA, I was very adamant about not painting. I was like, I'm a drawer, like painting is elitist, like I'm not messing with that shit. And then I had Jack Whitten as a professor, and he got me really excited about this idea of plasticity and to think about like what is like paint and to think about, you know, through painting and to think about the fact that paint is not just an image making device, but it's something that has actual weight, it's a substance, it has structure, it's like an object, it has an object to it. So he got me to think about the supports and everything that I'm drawing on, and to not think about them as random, to think about them as charged objects as well, as much as the image. So for me, it really was. And then like all of a sudden I realized I have all this paper I've been collecting since high school. So like, you know, so I started drawing on that and I kind of haven't stopped since. And when I do draw on like traditional like art paper or sketchbook paper, I don't know, I mess with it sculpturally. I try to like kind of give it a different kind of physicality to point to the fact that it's something that you're looking at and it's not just anonymously holding an image.
Okay, so pivot time. Charlie, hi. Sorry, we've been
hey Charlie.
Hey.
Throwing words back and forth, but something that I'm super hyped to get to too is this idea of collaboration. And you know, I've had the fortune to have Kenny curate a show for me and curate me in another group show. And you know, Charlie, I know that you hold an amazing space, and you know, as a gallerist, are in collaboration with artists and make a lot of things happen. And you know, as somebody who's been out here doing things, you know, like I hold you in the highest regard as in the way that you like move and support people. And so I just wanted, you know, I just want y'all to jump in and talk about you know, Kenny, this is a point where I was thinking about like, we as artists are always organizing ideas in our studio, but I know that you're profound in this way that not only do you organize your own ideas, your own works, all the different various ways in which you make work and your practice moves, but then you've pivoted it outside of your studio into the world and started to curate for other people, including myself. And so, like, I just want to hear about, you know, what it means for y'all to collaborate. Kenny, like your experience as a curator. I'm just opening it up and throwing it out there. And what I'm gonna do is show some of the images that you curated, as far as like the shows that you curated for me and Charlie's space, and then let's just go at it.
Cool. Do you want to start, Charlie, or?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, thanks for the very kind words. I mean, I kind of got lost in there for a second. I was happy to just be a viewer. You know, I was like, I'll just sit back. I don't need to be on the panel anymore here. You know, I think that speaks to the testament, though, as you guys as storytellers. as artists, as curators, your ability to tell stories of yourself, of others, it takes a lot to put that out. I mean, literally on the page for you, Kenny, and on the canvas. So, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to work with you guys. There's this really wonderful Venn diagram of how our lives have intersected. And I think that handing over the space to Kenny to curate that show that you were in, Michael, that's pictured here now, opened me up to your practice. And I think that part of being a gallerist is in some ways being a storyteller as well, but not my own personal story, letting others tell that story, and letting people's worldviews, personal views, social views, political views come out through those presentations. So when Kenny came to me and, said, can I organize a show? I said, well, of course, absolutely. If I had it my way, Kenny would organize at least one show a year, because he's constantly opening my eyes to different artists, different ideas. And I think that that's sort of the beauty of having a space that people come to, whether it's physically or online, especially in this new age we're living in. But giving people the opportunity to experience new things, I think, is what this is all about. And I'm just grateful that Kenny allows me and trusts me to host this work, and vice versa. I think that one thing that struck me was when we were talking about some of these ideas leading up to this talk was, Kenny was like, I don't know about this word curator. I don't really think of myself as a curator, more of an organizer of ideas, but I really do think there's a storytelling aspect behind it. At first look, you may look at the artists that he included in his show, and everybody's got their own practice, their own medium. They're all bringing different things to the table, but it's also a very personal story. I mean, each one of those artists had a connection to Kenny. And I think that tells a lot about who he is as an artist, as his practice, but also as somebody who wants to champion his peers, which I think is honestly happens few and far between these days.
Nice.
And to be really real with you, like, I do that really selfishly. Like, I'm a really selfish curator. Like, I'm trying to put together the work that I want to see and that I need to see as an artist, and it really is trying to create, again, a situation where I can learn something again, and reintroduce information to myself. But because curator sounds like I have this knowledge of something. No, all I have is an idea that I want to see happen in real life, and I want to build the world that I want to see, kind of. So yeah, it's really, for me, it's a collaboration. It's talking to everybody. It's having them connect with my idea in a profound way, so that it can all make sense. It doesn't matter what work is in the show. It's all gonna blend together. And I think it's really important, especially being outside of school, where I don't have any assignments anymore. So I'm trying to give myself this homework of all right, what would happen if I put Mario, Michael, and Hangama in a show, and what would happen in that context? What kind of cake is that gonna make or something?
Yeah.
And it's really exciting, and it's really not about having an answer or a thesis.
Yeah.
It's about just prompting something,
Yeah.
and instigating something.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll speak to that too in regards to collaboration with you. It's the story of you come into my studio and looking at these prints and being you should show these. Matter of fact, I'm gonna make an opportunity for you to show these, and they have never been seen. I'm gonna share just to show a couple images real quick so everybody knows what I'm talking about. As somebody who is trained in sculpture, but I have a history of making all types of things. I just never would have shown these. These were for me, similarly to how we're talking about drawing. And just the opportunity to build with you, and be vulnerable and have an opportunity to show these, I think, was amazing for me, and my creative process. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm just gonna scroll through real quick.
Oh.
But yeah, So, okay, what I want to do now, because, you know, we've been like referencing music and referencing collaboration, and I'm sure that there's more that we'll bring up in this, but I want to show this video that Charlie put together, brought forward, that I got to do some music for, but I feel like it's a dope like entry point into the collaborations that we have been a part of together, working together, because, you know, we got a band, and also just in general going forward, it's like a good starting point. So,
yeah.
let me see. Oh, that's playing.
Can we see it?
Computer's going haywire. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh, that's embarrassing. My fault, everyone. But I got it under control now, I think. Let me see here.
It's funny because, like, I feel like in talking about the drawings, we haven't talked about sampling.
No, and that's why I kind of want to be here, because I feel like this is a great. This is a lot of the ways that we think about drawing, and that I know that you think about drawing. I think about sampling and the way those cross-pollinate our present. So let me share my screen one more time. You know, what's a good talk without the computer freaking out?
Something has to happen. There we go.
What of this planet, Master? I gave a promise once to an honorable man. That planet is not for such as we. How could one such as you help one such as I? I will need nothing, who desire nothing.
Great, do you not desire to survive?
looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire.
The rose is a rose from the time it is a seed to the time it dies. Within it, at all times, it contains its whole potential. It seems to be consistently in the process of change, yet at each state, at each moment, it is perfectly all right as it is.
Wow, I forgot about that movie. I forgot about that movie. That's amazing.
Wow, that was crazy. That was fun to watch.
I
And
haven't
shout to
watched
Daniel.
that since it
And
was.
shout to Daniel for shooting that. Daniel's a really great photographer we've been working with for a while now. Like videographer too. But yeah, it's like I heard that for the first time right now.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Jesus Christ.
That's one of my favorite things we've done. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, that was like, I remember Kenny, you came to me and you're like, I want to put together this video. And I was like, all right. I was like, do you, man? And I was like, I had no idea what to expect. And I remember getting an email from Daniel Greer. As you mentioned, you shot the video, and I watched and I was just like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, this is just like the most beautiful insight to not only how you guys collaborate, but also, Kenny, you know, I've heard these stories from you about how you start the day the same way every day, sweeping the floor, cleaning the studio. And I also have these fantasies of just like sitting on your couch in your studio and watching you paint, which I know sounds weird, but like, as like the dealer, it's just like, you know, there's this like this sort of storied idea that, you know, I'm just like hanging out in the studio all the time. I wish that was the case, but it's not. So this was sort of like my way of doing that in a strange way. But I just love everything that this video brought to the table. And it also opened up a lot of doors for other artists that I work with. I mean, Alterance was like, I want to put together a video. He put together a video.
Yeah.
And I thought that this was really sort of a nice moment to sort of break the mold in terms of how we present and tease out shows, and how we bring in other artists to promote those shows. You know, Alterance brought in a musician to help him with his video. I mean, I'm curious just, you know, how you guys kicked this off with, you know, music selection, the production, and kind of how it took shape.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, I think like I kind of started off wanting a trailer for the show. And I get, you know, and I get excited about movies before they come out. I'm like one of those people, and I like go on these like trailer rabbit holes and like, you know, look up all these things. So I think like I wanted to create a space where people can get amped about the show without me having to share the work. Because I think that sharing the work also like gives people the impression that they've seen it already. And I think seeing something in process in the studio like gives a different kind of like, it's a different kind of tease, you know? And for me, like the show had so much to do with so many different things that I wanted something to synthesize it. I wanted to like put it in a place together. So like I had all these ideas for samples that I wanted to use, but I didn't have the time to like create the music, and I wasn't interested in it. I wanted to like share that with somebody else and with Michael, you know? Because I think like something that I really love about art is that like you can find someone to help you with things. and it sounds simple, but what I mean is like that you can really build a community around your practice that like makes it so that like other people can like have different kinds of opportunities or insights to something that they can do. You know, for instance, I recently reached out to like a younger Dominican artist from here in the Bronx, and I asked him to do a flyer for a show. Like I didn't want to do it. I could have done it, but he was more excited to do it, and I think it gave him the space to kind of like vibe off the work a little bit, you know. So I think like creating these situations where like I can collaborate with other people is really important because then it re-engages me with the work in a different way where I'm just like I can get excited about it and not feel like I don't know, like I have to do this thing for this audience. It's more like look at the silly things that we do all the time,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think it was really important for me and you to like start because I feel we've had a band for like 2 years now.
Facts. No, facts.
And
For real.
and we're building in a lot of ways that like I feel like people who collaborate with music don't build, which I value, you know, like we haven't gotten to like a lot of the music yet.
Yeah.
And this feels like that first stage of like yeah, like a musical introduction to each other, even though I didn't, you know, participate in production of the music.
I mean, but you did though. You did though. You did. I
Like,
mean, the thing that was so hype for me about making this is our conversations. Like we had like 5 deep, long studio visits, building, talking about samples, talking about the music that we were listening to. You know, we had jam sessions. I was playing the drums. You were playing the drums. Like, you know, all that leading up to this. And like literally for me, I just had a really good time trying to translate the energy that I was feeling in your studio and in our conversations into the samples that you were pointing me to for the most part, and also just in the energy of the music. Like it was a really awesome experience. And like I said, like a lot of that stuff I made in your studio on my computer, and then I just came back and then put it all back together, you know? But yeah, I feel you, like this idea around, I mean, this is the thing I respect about both of y'all, and being in proximity to y'all, is that this art making, especially in the industry of it that we're in, can feel really isolating, and it can feel really competitive in this way that, like, you know, makes you want to like not share opportunities, share secrets, build, you know what I'm saying? And like I feel like this energy, you know, collaborating with you, Kenny, and like seeing how you move, Charlie, it's like, nah, this is about sharing and about building a community around what's important and shared ideas, and trying to like facilitate that and not be so like guarded about, you know what I'm saying? Like that still has to exist, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's something about community building in this that I, you know, that collaborating with you in general, I mean, that's why we're friends and why we're close, but I'm just saying in general, how many people are like looking out for other artists around them, trying to like show love and build around, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like you said earlier, Charlie, that's like less seen nowadays or something. And so, yeah, anyways, that was a ramble, sorry, but it
absolutely
good.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's how I got put on, you know, like I feel like a lot of artists, like when I was younger, were the ones that were like telling me to go to these openings, inviting me to their studios, telling me what I should be asking my gallerists for, teaching me how to like look at it. So it was that kind of support that I saw that I'm just trying to pay forward in a lot of ways, but also try to be sensitive to like people's realities too. And it's like not everybody, you know, you're not going to help everybody by like introducing them to a gallerist,
right?
You know, like that isn't always a solution for certain people. Sometimes it's like, let's go to my studio and draw, you know, or like let's really like become friends.
No,
you know, because I think the other thing that happens, and this happens a lot, is like, you know, I'll get people who ask me for recommendation and I haven't talked to them in 2 years, and I won't talk to them for another 5.
Right.
You know, like I'm not about that life.
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, it's sad. You know, it's really sad that they're like missing an opportunity to actually engage with me or like connect with me. But I think people like you, or people that I really like want to continue to like grow with, like I have to provide space for people like that, because like that's what I want to see as I continue to do this, you know. If I can help it, I will, you know.
Well, what do you think, friends? Should we open this up to the community and take some questions? Let's do it.
Such a good moderator.
How you doing? Yeah, time is flying. That's like that was.
That
It felt like
That's
10
wild. Wow. Yeah.
Time's totally flying. That's I don't believe that you guys were all nervous at the start of this because
I'm still
this has
shaking.
been awesome. And
Yeah.
you all seem so natural and like you do this all the time. And
First time.
Oh.
it's it's obviously also genuine what you're sharing with us, and so that helps. And but this has been awesome and totally fascinating. So thank you for that. I want to invite our audience, please, at this time, if you haven't already, and there are comments or questions that you want to ask or share, please do that. Put them in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we'll get to those. And I just have a few kind of thoughts and questions and comments that have occurred to me. So Kenny, was the initial idea of kind of like releasing these drawings for a show to the public? I mean, if I understand correctly, it sounds like at no point in the creation of these drawings were you doing it with a show in mind. Like it's a whole different thing when you're creating these drawings. So what did that take? Like, what did you have any hesitation about putting them on display in a public way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that I became kind of like skeptical about is putting them in frames. I've always shown drawings in vitrines or shown them kind of like just on the wall. Because again, I want to point to the fact that they're objects too, and that they're things that require a different kind of care than just being displayed. But seeing them in the like with the way the framer kind of worked with the drawings, like it felt really good. It felt like you're actually looking at these objects as opposed to looking at just like images, But that was my only hesitation. But I didn't intend to show these. Like this is not something like this is like it's a part of my practice that I reserve for myself so that I can reflect on these things.
Yeah.
So
and that makes it's such a personal. I mean, I always feel like artists are sharing something so deep and personal when you do a show, and in this case, like that's kind of magnified with these drawings that you've just been creating for yourself primarily. I want to say that video, which I love. So I just want to make sure I understand. So Michael, you did the soundtrack for that video. You did the music. Cool. And that video really brings home the point about the non-immediacy of painting versus drawing, like what you were talking about, drawing having these vibrations and connecting you with ancestors and with the object. And boy, to see that video of all of the artifice and everything and the rubber gloves and all of it and sweeping beforehand, like to do the painting, that really brought that home in such a powerful way. The video is fantastic. Thank you guys for doing that. And if we're not is that up online some way to, available for the public to see?
It should be on the website, right?
Yeah, it should be on the gallery's website, but we can also send a copy to you guys if you want to put it on the museum.
Yeah, we might have. I'm not sure. We might have it already, but if we don't already have it as a link, like we try to put related links and stuff and information on the webpage for the exhibit. So if it's not already there, I definitely want to put it there. It's fantastic.
Perfect.
So let's see. I have a question here from Shanta, and then I have a couple other thoughts and questions that I want to share. Where Shanta says, not a question, but a comment. Really love the fact that this show is here, and this is a really fascinating conversation. Thank you all. Well, thank you, Shanta.
Well, thank you.
Really, really thoughtful artist in our neck of the woods.
Cool.
Luis writes, great talk. I did arrive a little late. I was wondering, Kenny, what questions and or problems do you solve in your head while you're painting, if that makes sense? What do you think about while you paint?
A million. I like how Michael's laughing. Everything is a problem. I'm like covered in doubt when I'm painting. I think that's like, painting is, again, it's like the newest thing. So for me, it's like, I'm just waiting for that day where people will discover that I'm an imposter, that I'm not an actual painter or something like that. Because it still feels very vulnerable and like, am I doing it right? You know, like it's in a very like fresh stage. So, but I think the challenges for me are sincerity, like remaining sincere and remaining like honest in terms of my decision making. Especially if I'm like kind of like vibing and like kind of going autopilot. Like I have to kind of like catch myself every now and then and remain present. So remaining present is always a real challenge. Um, and also the material is so like seductive and so like kind of fun to play with that I feel like I get lost in like me touching the surface and not necessarily like creating um something whole. So I think like it's always like tough to feel like confident, to be honest. Like it's really it's a really like vulnerable place to be painting, for me at least.
I just want to chime in here is that I always want to fight you when you be on that saying imposter stuff because
Yeah, I
like
know.
I understand,
I can feel you. Yeah.
I understand that energy, but at the same time, it's like if you knew, like if we knew it, what we were supposed to be doing, or like if we weren't being like the thing that I respect about your practice the most is how vulnerable and how much confrontation with yourself happens in the studio and like the rituals like sweeping, collecting, how all of those things keep you in the studio and allow you to confront yourself in all these different ways. Like that's bleep word is not easy, you know what I'm saying? And like
Yeah.
nothing imposter, there's nothing imposter about that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's the wrong word to use. I think it's more like that I'm not going to be able to survive the process. I think that's what it is.
That's real.
It's a better way of
That's real.
putting it. Yeah.
So I guess I have kind of a follow-up question to that, which is, once your paintings exist, is your relationship with them different than it is with your drawings? And what's your relationship like with your paintings once they exist?
Yeah, I feel like that's a good question. Something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Like I don't know because and this is, I don't know if this is gonna sound like arrogant because it's a good problem to have, but the paintings like leave my studio so quickly that I don't get to live with them. And that's created a challenge. That's created a space where I'm like, what did I just do? You know, like a musician makes a song, you can listen to that song over and over and still sell that song. You know, like there isn't like I can't keep looking at the work anymore. And like I send these things out wet and I'm just like had to start from scratch every time. And you know, as opposed to kind of keeping things in the studio for a little while longer so I can actually learn from the thing that I make while I'm making the next thing. So I miss my paintings. That's my relationship to my paintings. And that's why I think I hold on to the drawing so tight, is because like that's the only thing I get to keep, you know? And I don't know if I like subconsciously made them on like really non-archival paper on purpose so nobody would want them. But I think like I want to develop a better practice of like holding on to certain things, maybe hiding them from Charlie. And like, yeah, you're not gonna see these. I'm not gonna send him an image of this. But I think like something I want to do in the long run is like hold on to my work for a little bit longer. Yeah.
Charlie, do you have thoughts about that?
I mean, it's funny, you know, I try to, I also, well, I'll preface this by saying that yes, things often leave Kenny's studio wet, but over the last 3-4 years that I've had the opportunity to get to know Kenny and work with Kenny, I know exactly how he works and the process that he has, and I have the utmost respect for it. And you know, I never like to rush him. In fact, there's some times where I see things and I'm like, I know you're going to keep working on this.
Yeah.
And you know, there are also times where I say, do you want this back? Because I know the next time that I see it, it's going to look completely different. I wish that we had an image of, and maybe it's in Kenny's studio right now, there's this beautiful orange canvas in the video.
Yeah.
That painting was done or close to done for his show in November. If you saw it now, you wouldn't believe that it was the same painting.
I can point to it. It's like right over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's a totally different work. And what I love so much about Kenny's practice is I think that if I got back every painting I ever sold by Kenny and gave it back to him, I think 95% of those paintings he'd paint over or do something.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And I think that the beauty, one of the most beautiful things about his practice is the fact that it's constantly evolving. And if you give him the chance to continue the story, he's going to do it. And I look at a lot of his paintings. Each individual painting is like a book, and every layer that goes onto it is another chapter. I joke around with him that if you, in 20 years, when his work's hanging in all these museums around the United States, if you were to take some sort of X-ray of these paintings, you would see layer upon layer upon layer of different paintings. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about them. And so, yeah, he should hide things from me, because I do. I do also think that these should be out in the world. People should see them. I mean, he himself said it. You know, these are works on paper that he never imagined showing. And seeing the presentation that you all put together at Brattleboro and the job that Sarah has done curating this exhibition, it's fantastic. And I can't wait to see it. I'm so excited to come and see it on May 15th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just want to add.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that, like, with what I was saying before, like, it's not that like Charlie's aggressively attacking my studio, taking things. That's not the case at all. Like, he's like, you know, and the reason why our relationship works is because he is very like in tune and sensitive to the way that I've been working, and like the space that I've needed, and like the support that I've needed, like in such a tremendous space. So thank you, Charlie, for that, for sure. But yeah.
I feel like you guys should work out like an arrangement where the paintings go to their homes, but with an understanding that they're going to come back at some point to get painted over, and then go back, or maybe go somewhere else.
I've thought about all the ways.
I feel like that would drive Kenny crazy.
I would love that. You know what? If somebody came to me and said, I'm going to sell you this painting, but you're going to have to give it back to me in 5 years, I'm going to totally repaint it. You're going to get it back after. Oof. Yeah, I kind of like that. Let's roll the dice.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So speaking of Sarah, who's our exhibitions manager at the Brattleboro Museum and who curated the show, connected us with all of you and with so many other amazing curators and artists. Sarah has a question here from Michael and Kenny. She says, Michael touched on this when he asked about secrets, but I wonder, how do you straddle the line between sharing very personal and tender parts of yourself in your work versus protecting them and deciding not to share them or reveal them? How do you make that decision?
Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Sure. I mean, I feel like it's not really a decision on what to reveal. Like, it's all there, but it's like I develop strategies around it to like push you away again. So it's like protecting, like, you know, for instance, if I have something that's like very like telling of something personal, I try to like kind of not disguise it, but build around it so that you're kind of too distracted to like go deep into it. And I think there's also like, especially with painting, I think if there's a draw, like, you know, like something that literally lures you into a painting because of like the color and because of like the textures, or like, you know, something aesthetic, and then being confronted with something very dark on top of that, I feel like creates a resistance where you're not going to go too deep into it. You just got to trust that it's there. It's like walking into a room knowing that it's like haunted. It's like you're walking in, you're not talking to that ghost, and you're gonna go get your jacket that you left in that room, and you're gonna walk right out. You know, and I feel like that's the kind of space I want to create with the paintings. It's like yeah, this thing is charged and it's meaningful, and it's like, you know, it could be holding something very like secret and powerful, but it's just there, and it's not for you. You know, just like, I don't know. It's a lot of different ways to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, I feel like the way that I approach that in my practice, and I feel like something you and I talk about a lot, Kenny, is the like image, object, and right. And so like a lot, you know, like for me, it's like in my work, I think about, the artwork and the art content, but I also think about the energy imbued and like some of these works existing as like power objects or objects of themselves that are containing and not just self-referential, but pointing outside of themselves. And so that can be with aesthetic choices or like layering of content for me. But for me, the way that I kind of think about it is all of the objects and things that I make are themselves and something else. And it's the and that allows me to protect the secrets or protect myself in it because it's functioning on multiple planes at the same time.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh. Yeah. Cool.
Fascinating. Really interesting question and really interesting responses. You guys, I think we're going to wrap it up there.
Cool.
Unless there's anything else that you wanted to share or that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about.
I mean, I'm looking down at my Millennium Falcon right now, but I don't think I'm going to share that.
Nah, share. Come on, man.
All right, fine.
Oh yeah,
So
you
I
should
made,
share that.
I made this on Monday.
Good Lego thing going.
Really?
Yeah.
I made this on Monday. It's actually the first kit I ever completed. As a kid, like I always had Legos, but I didn't have like a set in particular. So it felt really good to do that. And to kind of just sit and meditate for a day and really think about how these engineers kind of develop these layers in the Lego situation. But for me, it has a lot to do with painting because there's so many decisions that happen in Lego building that don't get seen in the end. And painting is so much about that. Like Charlie said, like if you take an X-ray and look through the paintings, that you'll see all these layers and all these other paintings that I don't necessarily think of as gone or as edits. Like for me, it's like infused with the power of those older paintings. And I think the Lego thing is something I'm really interested in continuing. And just the idea of building in general with like units or something like that. I think there's something to that I'm really curious about. So yeah.
I love that. When you do a Lego body of work, we please let us know it in Brattleboro.
Yeah. Yo, there's one more question that I think we should talk about.
Yeah, I see that. There's a comment from Molly. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just gonna say, the question is, how do we feel, wondering how the panelists are feeling about viewers' ability to process these complex drawings virtually as opposed to in real life. As you know, in the New York Times piece from today, the writer wrote a beautiful and perceptive piece, even without seeing them in person. How do you feel about the fact that most people are experiencing the show virtually?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I think like my gut is telling me like that it's unfortunate, but there's something else telling me that this is also like providing access to a lot of people who can't come to the show anyway. So even if we weren't in the pandemic and people couldn't see the show, like this is a good opportunity for them to experience it. But I do think like anyone who can, like if you're able to like see them in person, because again, like in my mind, they're meant to be held, so there's something about them being touched that's really important. But I'm grateful that like the person who wrote the article is like that resonates with them, that there's an objecthood that transfers beyond seeing something in person, that they can actually feel it by seeing something digitally or remotely. I think I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, to speak to that too a little bit, like for me in general, this pandemic has forced me to reconsider like these ideas around power object and between like the image object, because a lot of the ways that our work is being perceived is straight up imagery, and what that can mean, how that does still kind of translate a power through like Instagram or online, how people are seeing it, but it's something that I never contemplated or like had to wrestle with in the way that we have to wrestle with it now. And so I think it's very important. It's like definitely expanded my ways of understanding and seeing my own work and having to contend with how to put it out there. So.
Yeah, and I think in undergrad, I think I went to undergrad before social media. So I think like something that our teachers always encouraged us to do is like, you got to see it in person. You can't just look at a slide. And this is back when we still had slides. But they were like, seeing it in person is like something else. And like this idea of like the aura of a work. And going back to like, what's his name? Like Walter Benjamin's like art in the age of mechanical reproduction, you know, and think about what does it mean to reproduce an image. We're dealing with the same thing. It's nothing different, just in a much more expansive like level. So like to say that there's something like lessened with the experience is not necessarily fair. Because I saw Guernica in textbooks for 15 years before I saw it, you know, and like I saw it and it made a big impact on me, but like I still got something from seeing it in production that has value, has some value. So.
I just have a related question there about your show in particular, Kenny. Would you have preferred the drawings to have been presented in a way that that viewers could come and hold them?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Did you even discuss that?
I mean, I thought about that. But, yeah, I was like, I want people to like pick them up and look through them, and then it's like that's not sustainable, you know. It's like then the more that happens, the more they can get damaged, and like then less people can see them. And I think it's more important to create a situation that people can actually experience the work. But yeah, like I want them to be like handled. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Sarah's saying no.
Yeah.
You guys, I can't thank you enough. It's, you know, it's like a dreary, rainy Thursday night here in Vermont, and this is just you've just transported us somewhere else, and this has been such an amazing hour plus, and I'm so grateful, Kenny, for your work, Charlie, for what you're doing, supporting Kenny and other artists, and Michael, for your participation here and for your work. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for sure.
Yeah, it's been great.
I just have a couple things I want to mention before we sign off. This whole conversation is being recorded, and we'll have the recording available on our website probably tomorrow or the next day. If you go to events and then video archive, you'll find a link to it there. Please feel free to share it with people who couldn't tune in tonight, who you think might be interested. Cool. Our website is brattleboromuseum.org. And those of you in the audience, maybe you'll join us again next Tuesday night. We have a great event happening lined up. It's a talk titled Black Representation in Children's Literature. And that's a talk with three African-American children's book author illustrators, Rio Cortez, Daniel Minter, and Javaka Steptoe. I think that's going to be really great. So cool. Maybe see you again next week. And if any of you happen to be in the Brattleboro area, please do come to the museum. Even if you can appreciate and have seen the work online and virtually, please do come for an actual in-person, non-screen-based art experience. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 4, and it's safe and social distancing is not a problem and masks are required. But if you can't come to Brattleboro, you can see the work on our website. There's a really great virtual tour of the exhibit and the other exhibits we have out right now. Again, that's brattleboromuseum.org. I think that about does it. Thank you everyone out in the audience for being here tonight. Kenny, Charles, Michael, thank you so much. Stay safe, take care of yourselves. Look forward to seeing you on May 15th.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, good
Thank
night.
you. Take care.
Bye.
All right.
Yeah.